next segment where we look at some ministry leaders, and something really stood out to me when I was doing some research on what's happening in the ministry world in Australia. And I don't know if you're in Australia, and you're in the ministry world, you probably would have heard of an organization called Youth Alive. They've been running for 40 odd years now, and a great organization that run youth events to bring, it's evangelistic youth events. When I was back in Australia running our youth, we were quite connected with Youth Alive, attended a lot of their events, and the leadership there was really impressed with what they were doing. Now, and Dr. Rod, you're actually pretty close with some people in Youth Alive as well. But one thing that really stood out is how they've, an events-based business, right? How they've recovered from COVID, right? Because obviously during COVID, a lot of events-based businesses struggled, closed down, aren't in existence anymore. But how there's an event called Wonderworld, which is in Brisbane, how they're actually creating this amazing event that's attracting youth that is bigger than just a typical worship event, right? It's something bigger that they're attracting people to be able to have an opportunity to then evangelize to people. Dr. Rod, what's your experience with these Youth Alive events?
Well, I'm too old to go to them. Actually, I'm not. Most of us pastors do receive invitations, believe it or not. But my acquaintance with Youth Alive was actually when my own children were going through school, and they went to a number of Youth Alive events, and they absolutely loved them because they're just made for young people, absolutely made for young people. I think this is a really important endeavor within Christendom. Youth Alive isn't the only one. It's probably the highest profile because of the very large crowds that they do attract. There are a few others that operate around Queensland, where I live, and in the other states of Australia. They make a significant point of contact with young people because, sort of to use the cliche, they speak their language.
Yes.
So they get something very different to what they would get, say, in a small church setting, which is what I would provide. I don't have the big lights and the loud music and, the big stage and the big bands. Small churches can't usually do that. But what small churches can do is to support these events and send their young people along to them, maybe even subsidise their young people to these events. I know the leadership in Youth Alive, and they're top notch. They're very good leaders, really outstanding leaders, to be perfectly honest, because it's an organisation that needs a lot of good leadership. For one reason, they rely very heavily on volunteers.
Yes.
And man, you need good leaders.
Yes.
To marshal a large, effective team of volunteers, and they do that.
I always say you have not led unless you've led a team of volunteers.
Absolutely. Well, you know all about that too, of course. The largest team of volunteers I ever had, I think, was 120 when my wife and I were involved in setting up a Christian radio station. And at one stage, we did have 120 people involved as volunteers at various levels and in various areas. One of the interesting things about Youth Alive is I'm not aware that Youth Alive has ever had a lot of charismatic leaders, but yet they've been able to reach out to young people so effectively over such a long period of time. What they've had is good, solid leaders who themselves very strongly adhere to a Bible-based, Christ-focused worldview. So they're very solidly biblically based. And I think that's one of the reasons why they've been such a successful organisation over a long period of time. And they've built up a really good reputation with local authorities, for example, because of the good behaviour of the people who attend and so on. The only thing I would say is this, and this is definitely not a criticism of Youth Alive. If you're a pastor and you're sending your young people along to events like those that Youth Alive put on, don't neglect your role in discipleship.
Don't abdicate. You can delegate it.
No, absolutely not.
Don't abdicate it.
You can't outsource it.
Yeah.
That's something that you've got to do within the local church. And as you mentioned, Craig, Youth Alive is largely an events-based organisation. I mean, it's always there in the background, and it is part of a larger denominational structure, but it doesn't disciple young people.
Yes.
Because it's not going to have an ongoing relationship with all of the young people who come to their events.
That's not their calling. That's not their purpose.
No, it's not what that. No, absolutely. Yeah. So don't think they're doing it for you. That's my point. We in the church have that responsibility, but I just absolutely applaud what Youth Alive do.
Yeah. And
I think it's a good idea for pastors to be encouraging their young people to go to the events, because they really are very, very high quality events.
Yeah, one thing, a couple of things you said there was one thing that I really love that they do is you said they speak their language. And it's really easy to do that when you know your calling, you know your purpose, and you have a lane and you stick in your lane, because we're one body in many parts, right? We're all meant to work together. We're all here. We're all called to work together, but we're all here to contribute. And I think that there's no, especially in the church as a whole, we tend to work in isolation or work in silos. And we need to understand that there are organizations that can contribute and help make what we do as a whole better, and not be afraid that, they're going to steal them from us and they're going to take them away, and which I know that a lot of pastors have that feeling. Something else you mentioned was, like, as a pastor, you don't have access to certain resources. And so we do need to, as pastors like yourself, be looking to resources that will engage certain groups. And I'm going to use this as a shameless plug, right? Is about our leadership development program. It's mainly been, although it's open for everyone, it is mainly focused for young adults because it's speaking their language. It's speaking to purpose. It's speaking to the questions they're asking that when they're now entering into adulthood, where they're leaving school and discovering their life and their position in society and community and the church. And so it's being created, and we developed a mobile app so it speaks directly to them. It's on their phones. It's so easy for them to use. We did it so that we could speak to the young adults. And it's a resource there, not so that we can build our thing, but it's a resource so that you don't have to build that thing. We built it. Let's work together. That's the whole point of this. Like Dr. Roy said, you got to partner with things like Youth Alive. Fine, it's a great resource, but you as a leader can't abdicate that part of your ministry and go, oh, well, Youth Alive does the youth stuff. We'll send them there. No, the best way to get advantage of Youth Alive is to use it as an evangelical tool, as a great event that's going to engage your community, but it's your responsibility to then follow up on the discipleship. And it's the same with our leadership program. It's there not for you to forget your young adults, but for you to equip your young adults and engage them, and don't leave them aside. So look, once again, shameless plug, link below if you want to check it out and see how it can work for your young adults. But I think it's amazing that if you speak to a lot of people, they would have had some experience with Youth Alive. And I think it all comes down to, for me, the fact that they know what their purpose is. They've stuck to their lane. You've mentioned that they haven't had very charismatic leaders. I think that's a perfect example of people think that, well, I need to be this charismatic person to be able to lead a big organization or to be able to create a movement. No, not at all. You are called to lead whatever you're called to lead. And when you're living your purpose and running your organization to purpose, you can't help but have major impact. Dr. Rod, any last thoughts on Youth Alive?
Well, I think one of the other big lessons that we can learn from Youth Alive is that Christians can have fun.
Yes, that's true.
And as leaders, sometimes we can become so focused on our leadership and so serious about what we're doing for the Lord that we can sometimes forget that, God's okay for us to have fun as well. And, the visuals that we've seen from the, what's it called again? Sorry. Wonderworld.
Wonderworld.
I had to check
yes.
my notes.
Yes.
The vision that these are young people having a lot of fun, and, it's okay to have fun. So as leaders, make sure, and I think this applies to people of all ages, as leaders, make sure that your people have a little bit of fun as well as everything
really
else.
Good. That's really good. And we can't forget the human aspect. I think that the connection side of things, right? That's why something like that. Look, Wonderworld. I didn't actually explain it. Is more like a mini festival, like a fair fete kind of thing they set up with rides and all that sort of stuff. And it's like it's a mini festival for youth, and I think that with you saying about having fun, that's one challenge that I have. And I think most leaders that are really driven leaders, we can get caught up in this. And I believe that's one of the big lessons I've learned in moving here to the Dominican Republic is here they're very social. There's always something going on. We're always catching up with family and friends, and there's always something. It's very easy for me to just get trapped in my studio, film my content, do my sessions via Zoom, just work in my office. Like, it's very easy to just get caught and stuck on mission. But remember, as leaders, it's our responsibility to influence people. How can we influence people if we don't have relationships with them? How can we influence people if we're not out in the community doing things? And so, yeah, that's a good point, Dr. Rod. Make sure we're having fun. Have fun with your people. Connect with your people. Don't forget to take time out. I had a meeting with one of my team here the other day. Let's go meet in Starbucks. We could have just caught up in the office and gone through everything. I'm like, let's go to Starbucks. Because here Starbucks is kind of a treat for them here. So yeah, it was. Let's remember to have fun. Let's remember to have fun and smile a little bit as well. Hey, you've just watched an excerpt from the On the Cube with Leadership podcast. If you've liked that, give it a thumbs up. If you've got any thoughts of how it challenged or helped your leadership, put a comment below. And we'd be honored if you would consider subscribing for more leadership content. Also, make sure you check out the playlist for more episodes like this.